Hi, hello, and welcome to today's video. I'm starting off at lunchtime, which is not usually the way we do it here. I feel like I'm finally ready to talk about something that I've actually never talked about on this channel before. First and foremost, I want to make myself some lunch. I'm also having this cayenne pepper, turmeric, ginger, lemon, and orange juice. We found this at the farmer's market and we've been getting it ever since. I just have like 2 or 3 sips a day and oh my god, it burns, but it burns so good. It just kind of gets things moving, if you know what I mean. In case you didn't know, turmeric actually gets activated by black pepper. So if you're ever drinking ginger turmeric tea, if you could just add a little bit of pepper to it, you'll reap the benefits a lot more than just having it on its own. Bernie! Come! I'm just gonna make Nick and I like this random bowl of the things that we have left in our fridge, which is a lot of greens, pour a little bit of olive oil and some balsamic vinaigrette on top of that, put the rice on top, and then cover it with eggs.
Oh my goodness.
So I guess this is my official PCOS story. I have wanted to talk to you guys about this for 2 years and I just couldn't, just wasn't ready. But I feel that I'm ready now and I'm really glad that I waited, because I think talking about something before you're ready to talk about it can be really painful, and I didn't want to make this a painful experience. So I've been on YouTube for 8 years now, and I have shared a lot. I've talked about my menstrual cycle, I've talked about what I use for birth control. We have so many videos about my experience with the copper IUD and when I got copper toxicity and all these different things, but there was a big piece that I left out, which is that 3 years ago I was diagnosed with PCOS. From about when I was 15 years old till around 20, maybe 21, I don't remember the exact age, but I was on the NuvaRing, which is a form of birth control. And up until going on birth control, my periods were pretty regular. I don't remember too much, which kind of sucks, but from what I remember, I think that they were consistent, somewhat painful, but nothing that I couldn't handle. Like I would just take a Midol and it was fine. I struggled with a little bit of acne and I was definitely overweight in middle school. So looking back on it now, I'm like, okay, some of those symptoms, they do make sense. I was still getting regular periods, and then I went on birth control for 5 years. And when you're on birth control, you're not ovulating, obviously, which means that you're not getting a regular period. You just get breakthrough bleeding and that's it. Birth control also impacts so many other things, as we all know, you know, your acne, your mood, your digestive system, I mean, everything, your appetite, like the list goes on. So I didn't really have any idea what was happening in my body at all. Then I decided after 5 years that I wanted to just kind of see, can I have a regular period without being on birth control? I just remember after a while, I was like, I just want to see if my body can function without it and what I even like without it. So I stopped using the NuvaRing. However, I did still want to be protected from pregnancy. I was in a relationship at that point and I switched to the copper IUD. I had the copper IUD for about a year and I was having pretty regular periods, but as the months progressed, I started to experience a lot of weird symptoms. And at about a year, that's when I was like, things are really not good. Hair loss, acne, weird taste in my mouth all the time, digestive issues through the roof. I started also getting severe night sweats. It was to the point where I would wake up in the morning and it would look like I had peed the bed. And then the last symptom, this was kind of the final symptom, and I was already going to doctors and trying to figure out what was happening in my body, but then this hit me and I was like, okay, I really need to find someone who's gonna help me. I lost my period. So I went to like 2 different doctors. I went to a thyroid specialist because I thought maybe something was wrong with my thyroid. They tested that, everything was fine. My levels were perfectly fine. I finally ended up going to a naturopath and she suggested that I get the copper IUD out and that most likely I have copper toxicity. She put me on a few supplements. I started taking selenium and zinc. I also at the same time was going to a gynecologist. She was the one who took the copper IUD out, and we decided to do an ultrasound of my uterus just to kind of see what was happening. And that's when I found out that I had cysts on my ovaries, which is a symptom of PCOS. It stands for polycystic ovary syndrome, and it's a really interesting hormonal disorder because all that it really is just a combination of symptoms. There's no way to actually test for it. If you have some of the symptoms, a lot of the times doctors will diagnose you. And it's really interesting because some doctors will diagnose you and others won't. At the time, I was going to 2 different gynecologists. One of them diagnosed me, the other one wouldn't. She said I didn't fit into the category, whereas the other one said that I did. I think that's actually one of the reasons I never talked about it, because I was like, I don't fully know what the answer is. There's a whole bunch of other symptoms that come with PCOS. Acne, weight gain, excessive hair growth on different parts of your body that you don't normally have hair on, thinning of your hair, oily skin. I think one of the most frustrating things that I had to deal with when trying to kind of manage PCOS is that there is just not enough information. I mean, I couldn't even get a diagnosis. The gynecologist that diagnosed me with PCOS, she said that since I was functioning really well on the NuvaRing, that I should just go back on it. I was in a pretty dark place at the time, and I just wanted to feel better, and I remember that I was doing pretty okay for the most part on the NuvaRing, at least better than what was happening once I obviously went off of it. So I decided to go back on it. And you know what? She was right. A lot of the symptoms did go away when I went back on the NuvaRing. I started having quote unquote regular periods, even though they weren't really regular periods. But you know, my acne went away, my hair stopped falling out. I was also trying to fix the copper toxicity thing that was happening. And so I look back on it now and I can't help but wonder how much of it was caused by the copper IUD, and did the copper IUD aggravate my body so much that I stopped ovulating. And when I stopped ovulating and getting my period, I started to have cysts on my ovaries show up. These are the questions that I had, and these are the questions that I never got answers to, because the only answer that they really had for me was just go back on the NuvaRing, just birth control. Birth control is gonna fix it. You won't have to deal with it. And then I remember her deliberately telling me that when you want to get pregnant one day, you just come in, we'll do some hormone therapy, you'll be pregnant, no problem. And I remember just walking out of that office feeling so overwhelmed, and I felt like my entire world was crashing. It's just not something that I ever thought I would have a problem with, you know, getting pregnant. It was a very traumatic experience, both mentally and physically. And honestly, I just didn't have the energy to try and tackle those symptoms naturally, so I decided to go back on the NuvaRing. I also went through a breakup, and I was kind of just casually dating, and I thought, okay, you know, it's probably better to be protected, because although there is difficulty of getting pregnant with PCOS, it's not impossible, and it's actually really hard to tell because you can't actually track your period. It's a lot harder to track your ovulation and to know when you're fertile and when you're not. It can just randomly happen. So a lot of women actually do accidentally get pregnant, and they think that they can't, and then they do. The week that I got the PCOS diagnosis, I cried on the phone to my parents about it every single day, digging way too deep through the internet, really freaking myself out, just basically reading that I'm infertile, that I'm probably never gonna have kids, that I'm gonna have to live with these symptoms for the rest of my life, etc., etc. My mom really encouraged me to go back on the NuvaRing just to kind of like start to feel better and just not think about that so much, because I was dealing with hormonal issues for a year on end and I was exhausted. So I did that, and I stayed on the NuvaRing for a year, maybe a year and a half actually. And 6 months ago, I decided to go off of it. And I actually did document all of that. I just obviously left out a personal part of this story, and I really hope that you guys understand why. I just wasn't ready to talk about it. Yeah. And I remember I promised myself that I wasn't going to talk about it until I was ready, until I had something to offer to you guys with it too. And I full-heartedly believe that I do now. So that year and a half of being on the NuvaRing, it offered me kind of just some breathing room where I could dedicate some time to just research about PCOS. Is it genetic? Which, by the way, it is genetic. However, it can also be caused from other factors. And my mom, who's a nurse, we sat down and we kind of created a plan for me to come off of the NuvaRing and to just see if my body can function properly without it. After a year mark of being back on the NuvaRing, I was like, you know, I think that I can do this. The more research that I was doing, the more I started reading stories of women talking about how they we're able to heal PCOS naturally. I guess the biggest thing with PCOS is that our bodies are more sensitive. And so I had to make a plan of how I was going to support my body. I started to do more research, reading books, I started listening to podcasts, I started following people online who also struggle with PCOS and took the more natural approach to healing it. So I started to control the things that I could control, aka my diet. So I started incorporating a lot more healthy fats into my day-to-day food. Salmon, avocado, olive oil, all the things that I used to, like back in the day, be really scared of. I was really scared of fats. I was always leaning more towards protein and carbs. Basically all the healthy fats were welcomed. Second thing that I could control was my exercise. Women with PCOS, they suffer from inflammation, and weightlifting causes inflammation. I mean, that's exactly what it does, which is a huge reason why I had to step back from weightlifting. And that's when I started to incorporate lots of walks, hikes, yoga, Pilates. You guys know I've talked about that many times now. Third thing that I did, and this is a huge one, I reduced my stress. I'll say this again, women with PCOS are so sensitive, and stress is like one of the first things to impact your hormones. So I started going to therapy, I started journaling, I started to listen to podcasts and read books about mental health, and just seeing how I can support myself, and also letting people around me know what I was going through so that they could help support me too. And then the final thing that I started doing, and I've been doing it over the last year, is acupuncture. I go to someone called Dr. Choi here in Los Angeles, and I'm actually going to leave his information in the description bar. This is not sponsored. I don't even know if he knows what sponsored means. He's an 85-year-old man from Korea. I started going to him before I went off of the NuvaRing. I think I probably looked into about 50% of the acupuncturists in LA until I found Dr. Choi. Again, I pay for this out of pocket. This is like not small. He doesn't even know that I'm talking about this. But if you're in LA and if you are struggling with hormonal issues and have been thinking about doing acupuncture, I can't recommend him enough. I'll have his information in the description bar. My first appointment with him was so interesting. It was the longest appointment that I've ever had with any doctor. He asked me so many different questions that no other doctor has ever asked me. He was very invested. He made me feel very safe. And I went to him for an entire 3 months while I was still on the NuvaRing, but we were preparing to come off of it. At the time, I went to him twice a week. And the appointments would last about 30 minutes. He also gave me some herbs to take, and to this day I still take them. But now that I've been off of birth control for 6 months and I've had 6 totally normal, completely regular periods, I only go to him once a week. And wow, I guess that's the end of it. I'm here now, 6 months later, with a totally regular period. I don't have acne, I don't have hair growth, I don't have hair loss, and I guess the biggest indicator that my PCOS is healed, at least at the moment, is that 2 months ago I had an ultrasound of my uterus. There was no cyst present, which I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when my doctor called me to tell me about the results, I cried. And I called my mom to tell her about it. I think I cried because I just remember all the feelings that I had when I was first diagnosed, and all the things that were happening in my body that were so, I guess the best way I could put it is, I felt like a foreigner in my own body. It felt like it just wasn't my own. Like it just was, we were not connecting. And now I feel like I've never been more connected, especially being off of birth control, not being on any hormones, and knowing that I'm ovulating, and I can tell now, like, there's so much that your body can tell you. I could make a whole video about holistic nutrition and Western medicine versus Eastern medicine, my experience with all of it and my opinion on it. If that's something you guys are interested in, please let me know. I would love to talk about it. I think that this experience has shaped me so much. I really feel like a different person. I can see my own progression throughout the last 3 years. I feel like I've really changed, and I've figured out what I'm really passionate about. And I guess in a way I'm really grateful for this experience. Do I wish it had gone differently? Absolutely. I feel like this video is already so long, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. If you guys have any more questions, please feel free to just leave them in the comments of this video. And any video ideas that you have, or just if you just want to tell your story, I mean, feel free. I think that sometimes like shame and embarrassment that comes from having a hormonal disorder as a woman, because it feels like this is what we are supposed to do naturally. So when you can't, it's like, it makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. Whereas, I mean, PCOS and other hormonal disorders are so common. They're just not commonly talked about. Also, I just want to add that there is nothing wrong with just going on birth control if that's the decision that you want to make. And if you don't have the capacity to try to like heal it naturally right now, or if you just don't want to, if you feel better being on birth control, that is totally fine. That is your decision and that is your body. Thank you guys so much for listening, for being here. I always appreciate your support and your love and understanding, and I really hope that you do understand as to why I never really opened up about this before. But yeah, thanks guys. I'll see you all in the next one.